Welcome, War Room 2020, live from Capitol Hill. It's Wednesday, the 4th of March, year of our Lord 2020, episode 21 on the John Fredericks Radio Network. Salem broadcasting throughout the country. America's Voice.news, the streaming service of the Trump movement. FM 99.1 in Chicago and 103.9 in the Chicago suburbs of Schaumburg. Joined finally back in the War Room after my journey up to Wall Street. More happening on that today. We'll get to that in War Room Pandemic. Jason Miller, the master communication strategist of the Trump come from behind 2016 electoral win, and also the transitions communication director. And on the phone, Raheem Kassam with down with the flu. Raheem, this is not the Morton's flu, right?
No, I hope it's just the flu. We did the show yesterday. Don't worry, Steve. I Lysoled the whole area you're sitting in right now.
I saw it. By the way, there are two guys that come up on hazmat suits right after this segment to knock on your door to give you the test. Okay. Super Tuesday and now Big Wednesday. What, Jason, you first, then Raheem, your first assessment, your first analytics.
So first analytic, I mean, look, they finally did it. They stole this thing from Bernie Sanders. They didn't just put their thumb on the scale or their foot on the scale. They took a 50-pound bag of flour and threw it on the scale.
Every local official, every county commissioner, the Democratic Party came home to the Democratic Party.
Everybody did. And here's the key thing for Trump allies to think about is because, look, here's what you're seeing this morning. You have a lot of the media saying, what does a Biden-Trump race look like in the general?
We're a long way from there.
We're a long ways from there.
We're a long way from there.
Two fundamental dynamics to keep in mind. Joe Biden is still the crappy candidate he has always been. Hunter Biden and all. Where's Hunter, by the way? So number one, nothing has changed.
He's an artist out in L.A.
Right. He wasn't at the election night party, though, for Biden.
In L.A.
No, I mean, it's sad when you have to rely on Simone Sanders to save you Joe Biden and not Where's Hunter. But Where's Hunter was hiding up in the hills. But number one, Joe Biden is still the same flawed candidate.
The first guy that had never won a primary event for 33 years until South Carolina.
Exactly. And the second thing about this Democratic Civil War is going to rage on. And they are coming out not just attacking Sanders, attacking his supporters. I don't know how they ever put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
They can't. First off, for all the Sanders supporters, although we disagree in some policy areas, I think for at least 10, 15, 20, 25% of the economic nationalists, you are so disrespected. The spiking the football to last night on MSNBC and CNN was, I felt, disgusting. I realize now they hate somebody as much or maybe more as the deplorables. They hate the Bernie bros. It's so contemptuous. I mean, everything is about, how Biden's great, Democratic Party came home and just, we have that David Frum. Do we have the David Frum clip? Do we know how to play that?
Very brief clip. Let me go and play it here.
Joe Biden appeals to people who pay their cable bills on the day it arrives. Bernie Sanders appeals to people who may forget to pay the cable bill entirely. And the first group, they're both equally morally worthy, but the first group are more reliable.
Does anybody pay their cable bill the day it arrives?
Okay, Boomer. That's what you got.
Yeah, the cord cutter weighs in.
Exactly.
The idea that Bernie supporters have cable television anyway. I think they have you get your Bernie membership card, you get a lifetime subscription to the Young Turks with it. You don't need anything else, right?
Bloomberg out. Okay, we got some breaking news.
Breaking news real quick, Raheem.
Bloomberg's out, his money's in.
Yes, he's technically suspending his presidential campaign, not suspending his billions. We'll come back to that later. Sorry, Raheem, just want to jump in on that.
No, that's big news. I just wanted to jump in while we get that developing stuff. I think it's worth noting as well, gentlemen, the turnout numbers from yesterday, especially on the Republican side, blowing way past the Obama 2012 numbers in key states. 3-4 times the number of people coming out to affirm Donald Trump as the candidate as well. And on the Democrat side, yes, there were some places where you had a higher turnout, such as in Virginia and others, but actually across the board, turnout was a little bit down in some of these places, which has got to be worrying. The New York Times lamenting this morning that Bernie's young vote just didn't come out on Super Tuesday. If they're not going to come out for Bernie on Super Tuesday, you think they're going to come out for Biden in the general?
What do you think the makeup of this? Look, it is in one regards a massive political turnaround. Remember, he had no organization, stone cold out of money. One of the big aspects we talked about in the win in South Carolina is how in 72 hours, right, do you really put this together, even with the earned media bounce? And your guys, for the rest of the segment, how do you think he actually pulled it together?
Yeah, this wasn't the Biden campaign that went and launched him into a big Super Tuesday win.
This is the Democratic Party.
This was President Barack Obama that launched him to this. And Raheem made this great point on air yesterday that was really that Susan Rice endorsement that was the tell.
Big.
That this is where they come off. But this was, what we're going to find out later is that President Obama himself was making some phone calls to make this happen. The way that Klobuchar, Pete, Beto, I think even shaved for his event. Harry Reid, everybody came off the sidelines on this. They did that, and the media weighed in. This was not, keep in mind, Joe Biden wasn't even up on TV in most of these places. But
not on TV. I think there are 3 or 4 of the states he never even went to have an event.
Never went to Massachusetts.
He didn't have the money. He didn't have the money. He didn't have the organization. They couldn't even stage an event for him in a place like Massachusetts.
Absolutely. And one, I got to tell you guys, one absolute boomer moment, since I know Raheem likes to pick on me. So yesterday I was like, hey, I'm going to make sure, and I live in Virginia, I'm going to make sure that I'm part of this, just post the numbers on Republicans that are turning out. So I go cruising into the ballot booth, and, Jason Miller is my address, go hand me my ballot, walk around to the corner. It's all the Democratic names. So I walk back up to the lady, and I'm like, hey, ask for the Republican ballot. She goes, oh, there is no Republican ballot. I'm like, what do you mean? She
they
goes,
called off the primary.
Yeah, she goes, Bill Weld didn't qualify for the ballot, so President Trump's all by himself. And so she's like, do you want to pick one of the Democrats? I'm like, no, I wouldn't vote for one of these losers. But I'm like, here's this back, and just mark void on it so no one can come in and give an extra vote for someone. But I felt like such a jabroni rolling in there. I was all proud to go and I'm going to make sure Trump gets 99.9%. Not 99.8% in Virginia.
Do you think, Raheem, what do you think about, why did at the end Bloomberg not represent in some of the states like North Carolina and Virginia, where the early polling showed he might be at least somewhat competitive? What do you think turned on him at the end?
Look, I think you got to look at this. You got to take a step back and look at this. Firstly, Elizabeth Warren with the shanking of Bloomberg not just 2 weeks ago, right? And he comes out on the second debate and makes the joke, the cute joke that, hey, I won so good last week, I'm surprised nobody else turns up. Then he's got a series of things that nobody's comfortable with. He performs poorly in the debates. He performs poorly in the town halls. He says weird things. He starts attacking things like Rent the Runway in his town hall, saying that not enough young people are wearing monogrammed shirts anymore. It's a whole bizarre thing. And I think, look, here's the thing. If you're Bernie Sanders, and you see, and you can't get your base out to come out in the numbers they're supposed to, how's a guy like Bloomberg, who's busy licking his fingers and touching donuts and coffee things, he has no way of motivating the base to come out. And I think that's all that happened there. It was an entirely artificial campaign. It was completely astroturfed. We made fun of that the whole time since he jumped in. The whole thing was astroturfed. And I think you saw the results of that yesterday. You can't fake these things. One of the things that's amazing about the Trump rallies, and I've been to several of them, you can't fake that energy. You can't just make that up, and that's what Bloomberg was trying to do.
And look, the energy is there on the other side as well, though I do have to give President Trump credit for an A-plus heckle. He tweeted out last night, the biggest loser tonight by far is Mini Mike Bloomberg. His quote-unquote political consultants took him for a ride, $700 million washed down the drain, and he got nothing for it but the nickname Mini Mike and the complete destruction of his reputation. Way to go, Mike. But, Raheem, I think you make a great point here. Look, this was not Joe Biden launching himself. This was a motivated Democratic base that wants to remove President Trump from office. That is why they turned out. They didn't turn out with the pom-poms cheerleading saying Joe Biden is going to be our savior. Again, he's still a massively flawed candidate. Even yesterday he was back to sniffing little kids' hair. He's weird. He's goofy.
Mixing up his sister and his wife.
Yeah, Raheem, if we can ask you to stay over for the next segment, too. This is the thing I said last night, I gave this talk, is that he still, because I went through and looked at all the South Carolina stuff they put up online. He was actually, I thought, awful down there, besides the moment he had at that town hall with the preacher, and obviously was at Clybourne's, and that is an endorsement that worked, because he was speaking for the base of the Democratic Party, not just for South Carolina, but also I think for Obama and others, that they all came together. Okay, Raheem, walk us through how you get involved in the show. How does the audience get involved in the show? How do they learn more about us?
Yeah, there's the URL is warroom.org, and the hashtag to take part live in the show is hashtag warroom2020. Jason and I monitoring that the whole time. We pick the best tweets, so make sure they're good.
Okay, we're going to take a short commercial break on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Salem Broadcasting, America's Voice. I want to thank all the guys at America's Voice and John Fredericks working on our technical issues every day as we try to remember. This is very complicated. We're on Facebook. We're on America's Voice. We're on YouTube. we're over 3.2 million on podcasts right now. I think with only podcasting, it goes everywhere else too. Okay, Jason, Steve, Raheem will return in just a second.
War Room 2020. Bannon, Miller, Kassam.
Bannon, Miller, Kassam here on War Room 2020. We're going to add Mike Bloomberg. Is he going to be a guest, a potential guest host, since he's now looking for work?
It might be. I mean, 3 feet high and rising. Not just a good De La Soul album.
Episode 21. John Fredericks, Salem Broadcasting, FM 99.1, FM 103.9, and of course America's Voice. News. God, it feels good to be back in the war room. I love doing it up at G News up in Midtown Manhattan, but it's good to be back in
the energy's back. Fired up.
Yeah, I'm fired up. Okay, let's talk about Bloomberg. He left, but his money didn't.
No, and this is going to be arguably the single biggest thing that we talk about for the rest of this year, because what does he have? 2,400 staffers. He has this infrastructure.
An amazing organization.
He has billions. And this is the thing to keep in mind. I keep going back to this about how terrible of a candidate Joe Biden is. We're going to have this moment as the Civil War rages on. Keep in mind, Joe Biden's going to have to go back to that debate stage with Bernie Sanders. Joe Biden's going to have to go back out into the trail into North South Carolina. He's going to have to be out there, appointing African-American female senators. Everything about Joe Biden. And again, where's Hunter? Where is Hunter? If you don't think, it's almost as if the Democrats jumped into this with Joe Biden and didn't even think of what the ramifications and consequences are going to be. They are now stuck.
Well, because Bloomberg was so bad in those first two debates, they saw the reality. If Bernie, remember, it's quite symbolic that Bernie went back to Vermont to do Super Tuesday. He thought it was going to be a coronation. He's going back to the home base, right, to do a coronation. He thought he was going to run the tables in Texas and California. Remember, keep Biden below 15%. Kornacki, who's pretty good on the math, did the math the other night, and it had 250 to 300, I think, difference in delegates just with a little bit of swings with the 15%. Remember, the big thing here is blowouts. Even in small states, blowouts mean more than these hotly contested things going forward. This is going to be a dogfight. Bernie's just not going to go away. The Bernie bros are not going to have it stolen from them twice. Bad enough to be stolen by Hillary Clinton. They're not going to tolerate being stolen by Joe Biden. Although I agree with you, the hand of the Obamas are in back of this.
Yeah, and look, right now, this delegate count, everyone has a little bit slightly different delegate counts up on their websites. The reason being is because some folks, keep in mind with the delegates.
In California, the vote's not going to be done for 3 or 4 days, is it?
If not even longer. Yeah. And keep in mind that you get a certain amount of percentage based on the statewide vote, then you go district by district, and you can get certain.
District, yeah.
And look, this is where it might be a big deal. There are a lot of these districts. Statewide, Bloomberg's at 14.8 in California. But you go congressional by congressional, this makes a difference on Bernie getting it. But right now, Biden, according to the Wall Street Journal, their tracker, which I think is the most up to date from what I've seen, they have Biden at 397, Sanders at 356, and then Warren's down at 48, and Bloomberg 43. Of course, he's dropping those swing. This thing's going to be nip and tuck. The next round of states that are coming up, some good ones.
Well, down south, he could get some blowouts. He wins big in Mississippi and some of these southern states. He could put a spread between him and Bernie, because Michigan and these states are all going to be tough. Michael Moore, where are you? Can you deliver that? Can you deliver a blowout in Michigan for Bernie? You big talk. I love all the talk. Now have some action. Bernie needs a blowout. Needs a blowout in Michigan.
And look, March 17 could be where they formally put that nail in the coffin, because you have Florida, Illinois, and Ohio.
Yeah, that's a big. March 17th, big day.
Yeah, and Arizona is the other one. You could make the case that Biden could run the table on the 17th.
So Raheem, what's your observations about Brother Bloomberg?
Well, I want to do a little bit of an obituary if I can. The guy comes in on November the 24th, promising the world, hiring all the, quote, the best and the brightest, building out his Instagram-friendly HQ, hiring all the influencers, fighting the meme war, plowing probably what will end up as more like 600 million That's probably about 6 million per day that he's been in the race. For what? For American Samoa. No, that's not to. No, it's true. But it's not to.
We'll always have Samoa. We'll always have Samoa.
It's not to nullify anything. This guy's a very dangerous and potent.
Well, remember the thesis of on the 24th. The thesis of his campaign, the working hypothesis, the theory of the case, as the New York Times says, is that Biden was crippled and Biden wasn't going to drop out, but he was going to implode. And it was clear he was going to implode in the first two, which he did. Bloomberg gambled. It's not the strategy, I don't think, that didn't work. It's that Mike Bloomberg himself, and I think the malpractice was putting him up so the world could see him, before Super Tuesday. When the world saw him, he just didn't measure up, and that's not about the height. I mean, they weighed and measured this guy as somebody that was not going to be able to defeat Donald Trump. Maybe his data, definitely his money, maybe his organization, but he personally was not going to be able to stand up there and take the blows that Donald Trump can. Donald Trump puts a death ray on you. Right, and who can withstand it? So that's why the resurgence of, and I call Biden the El Cid candidate. Right, he's just the guy strapped on the horse to scare everybody. There's nothing there. So I think we still got to let's. Raheem, what are your thoughts on Pocahontas? I think she's an establishment prop. They've told her, hey, we're not going to primary you. Jason doesn't agree with them. We're not going to primary you. You got to stay in there and siphon off Bernie's, the professor class of the revolution, right? The people that like the white papers, because Bernie's guys are not into white papers, right? What do you think about Warren?
So there's a new rant that's doing the rounds on social media this morning by Cenk Uygur, right? Who finished, I think, at 4 or 5%. But he actually gets it right in his rant, and I think it's unhinged. But there are also these, for me, an old Andrew Breitbart, scholar. There's hints of that there's this anger now, this deep-seated anger, this Civil War type anger bubbling up on the left that we've noted for some time, and Elizabeth Warren is the pure manifestation of what it is to keep Bernie Sanders off. I mean, more than Joe Biden, more than Michael Bloomberg, it's Elizabeth Warren that killed Bernie Sanders on Super Tuesday. A lot of people are going to be looking out there very, very angry at her.
That was the resurgence of Biden, and look, you gotta give credit to people. People have to understand he did not go to some of these states. He didn't have, forget an organization, they didn't have a place for him to land the plane, flying commercial. Also, remember, we were heckling Biden when he took the train up. Remember, he took the Acela up a couple of weeks ago to a fundraiser. And at the fundraiser, he had two fundraisers on Wall Street. Half the crowd at both didn't show up, said, hey, I hate to say I'm with Bloomberg. He's flying in the quiet car, which is tough for Joe up there. I mean, this is why, and I do think Pocahontas staying in this is a tell. I think it's the establishment sitting there, keeping her in this, keeping her on life support, because there's no logic for her candidacy right now. She can't even make a thing that I want to hang around with 500 delegates and see if I'm an alternative.
But she hates Bernie because she feels that she was the best qualified candidate, that she's the one who got the New York Times endorsement or co-endorsement. She's the one that had the 100 white papers. She's the one who did the work. Bernie Sanders just disappeared. She's the one that got there in the trenches and has fought for all of our liberal causes. She's the one who's been keeping it real. And Bernie Sanders is just, riding this media wave. Boy, but Raheem is right. I mean, they're absolutely, Elizabeth Warren is keeping her boot on Bernie Sanders' head. And if he wants to be able to keep this kind of a, mano-a-mano matchup going on, Elizabeth Warren's going to have to get out. Today would be smart. I mean, today all the headlines are on Bloomberg. But Elizabeth Warren gets out today, she's a footnote. No one really cares because she didn't spend $700 million.
Wait for a couple of days?
I'd say if I were Elizabeth Warren and you want to exit gracefully, do it today while Bloomberg's getting all the news, Biden's getting all the hype. But if you wait a couple of days, then all the emphasis is on you and people start talking about how terrible.
Okay, we're going to take a short commercial break. People should not. People in Michigan at a rally last night. Okay, she was in Michigan at a rally last night. Okay, we're going to take a short break now that the music blasting me out of here. Episode 21. We're going to return in just a second. Hashtag War Room 2020. We're going to ask Raheem to get a quick orange juice and join us back in the next segment. Episode 21. We're going to return in just a moment.
2020 with Stephen K. Bannon, Jason Miller, and Raheem Kassan. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Live from Capitol Hill, it's Wednesday, the year of our Lord. Wednesday, 4 March, the year of our Lord, 2020, episode 21. Okay, next week, the 10th. By the way, we got breaking news on Pocahontas. She must have been listening to me.
She must have.
Folk, we love you so much.
Elizabeth Warren is reassessing her pathway forward, which with her campaign this morning.
Reassessing, Raheem, is a buzzword for what?
It means you have 24 hours until you drop out.
Yeah, and again, I think
she won't do it today because she wants a bigger media hit by doing it tomorrow.
So I think do it today, and then you get less, I guess, introspection into your campaign. Everyone pays attention to Biden and Bloomberg. If she does it tomorrow, then it's going to be on. Here are the articles of the sad case of Elizabeth Warren, and at one point she was a front runner, then she failed. Do it today, you're going to have the least amount of blowback and damage.
So if your strategy say do it this afternoon, let's get it over with, right?
Yeah, I'd do it this morning.
Okay, 10 she's important because next week, 10 March, Michigan. Some other states in there, too. Potential for Biden to have a couple blowouts in the South. But Michigan could be – this is a very important day for Bernie because the calendar gets a lot tougher for Bernie after that.
Right. And look, Bernie Sanders did really well in states out west. And so next week, I think he'll do well in Washington State and in Idaho and in North Dakota. Joe Biden is going to clean his clock in Mississippi and Missouri. Michigan. Michigan becomes the battle. It's essentially a dead even race right now between the two. But Michigan is going to be...
That's sad for Bernie. If it's a dead heat race right now with Michael Moore and all the union guys up there, etc., he should be well ahead of Biden on this one, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's going to have to do something. And here's the other thing to keep in mind.
He also has to prove to the world he can beat Donald Trump in Michigan. If you can't beat Joe Biden, how are you going to beat Donald Trump in Michigan?
Right. Keep in mind that next Democratic debate, though, isn't until March 15th.
Yep. Until
after that. That's going to be in Arizona. It's also going to be a Univision debate, which would help Bernie Sanders. But look, this is, Biden, if I were Biden, I would just go to Michigan. I wouldn't leave the state of Michigan for this next week. Camp out and get the win there.
Raheem, what are your observations on this?
Yeah, I just don't see a pathway to victory for Bernie Sanders in Michigan. With Bloomberg dropping out, remember he gets 10% in the latest Detroit News poll, which already has Biden leading Sanders by 7 points. You add Bloomberg into that as well. Even with Warren dropping out, Warren had 7% in that poll. It still doesn't bring Bernie up there. He's still back. He's still going to be behind by a good 7 to 10 points. I don't see it happening, and I want to hear from Jason about how Jason you do see it happening.
Well, and he's got to do something to change the dynamic of the race, and because right now it's becoming it's Bernie versus the anti-Bernie. That's what it's stacking up on. How do we beat Donald Trump? And if Bernie Sanders can't get that focus away from beating Donald Trump. Or make the case that somehow he is better too.
But he's also got to turn into more of a children's crusade. Some of these states, the youth vote, this young vote he was supposed to bring didn't materialize. Some it did. Clearly, he's killing it with young Latinos, right? Where African Americans have basically essentially shut him out. They don't, they're not for the revolution. Basically, they're pretty pragmatic. They're saying, "Hey, we want to win. We want to beat Trump. We're not ready for a revolution." But I think he's got Ann Arbor. To me, is where it's going to center around. He's got to get them all out of the dorms up there at the University of Michigan, right? Or maybe Michigan State also, but the universities. If he wants, the only chance I see for him to do it, he's got all the working class guys he's going to get. Joe's still got great relationships with the unions, particularly the union heads. Bernie's got to turn Michigan into a children's crusade.
Look, he needs to have the Strokes playing Thursday, Public Enemy playing Friday, Bon Iver playing Saturday. Offer up free weed at every single event, e-scooters, soy lattes. Literally every gadget.
Are you saying that would actually, okay, Boomer, you're saying that would actually turn those young people out to vote?
I don't know. I'm a Republican. What do I know about the Democratic primary?
Jason Miller and the phrase "free weed."
They've got enough reason to not turn out. Don't give them another one. Just monging them out on the couch.
It's to Raheem makes the point. Where's the path? And this, I think, with Michael Moore and all these guys, you've talked a lot of smack, right? And look, we love the Bernie Bros. You talked a lot of smack. It's in your home state, and hey, Michigan is front and center. Michigan and Wisconsin are the game in 2020, right? And if you can't deliver it up there in some sort of broad-based working class and middle class revolt, right? how are you going to make the argument? Because you're going to get blown out of the water in Florida the week after, right?
Right, and here's the thing to keep in mind is that candidates don't magically change who they are in their 70s. And so you have a Bernie Sanders, for example. Remember, after Mayor Pete basically stole Iowa from him, Bernie was just like, oh, it's okay, can't we all get along? We'll just share the votes, we'll come back and do something on this. Bernie's not going to magically turn into a fighter. That's the thing. I don't see how he changes dynamic of where, rah, I'm the fighter, I'm going to go and stick it to Joe Biden, I'm going to show you guys something. I mean, he's just
always a pillow fight.
He's tooling around in the Subaru Forester, locking his wife out of the car, just, like we saw yesterday when he was trying to vote. Bernie's not going to change who he is.
Okay, Raheem, how do people get into the show?
Yeah, warroom.org is the URL for all the breaking news as it goes on. During the day, Greg Mans has got the War Room and hashtag #WarRoom2020.
We got to bounce back in a second.
War Room 2020. Bannon, Miller, Kassan.
Welcome back, episode 21. We're live from Capitol Hill the day after Super Tuesday, the morning after. Jason Miller, Natalie attired for his important meetings this afternoon, is in the War Room with me. We're live from the old Breitbart Embassy, and we've got Raheem Kassam, who's under the weather. There's two guys in hazmat suits outside of his townhouse on Capitol Hill right now, waiting for Raheem. Raheem, we know, is in a smoking jacket, with his Ugg slippers with his feet up. But Raheem, thanks for hanging in there and staying with us on this. Okay,
that was bizarrely accurate, by the way.
I got a vision in my mind. No.
Hold on, buried lead. Steve Bannon knows what Ugg slippers are. Raheem, do you think Steve might own a pair of Ugg slippers?
I think if you look at The Brink, I think you look at the film The Brink, you might see a segment in there. Anyway, okay, let's talk about kind of a miss by some of the Trump Nation on this socialism versus capitalism, Medicare for all of that. It's hey, at the end of the day, the Democratic establishment, which, by the way, I think Bernie would be a very tough candidate. I think on a mobilization side, I think anybody dismissed him. Charlie Kirk gave a great talk, I think, at CPAC that talked about this. Hey, don't dismiss this guy. But the Democratic establishment, which is, remember, Bernie's got a ceiling. It looks like about 35%, right? Some states a little bit more, but it looks like in 35%. Michigan will show us that about what his real ceiling is. But how, in setting up the general, Biden versus Trump, or the Democratic establishment candidate versus Trump, what happens between now and then in this civil war? We had it. The Tea Party had it. This is what led to the rise of Trump. They're having it in real time over the next 10 weeks. How vicious, even though Bernie's not a fighter, the guys around him, he's got a lot of fighters around him, and a lot of guys, he's got a lot of men and women in that movement, particularly younger men, people who, and they've already been chastised. Oh, you've been too nasty on Twitter, right? How hot are they going to burn, and what impact is that going to have in November?
Well, and I think part of this is going to feed off of what Sanders comes out and does. If Sanders just like he did last night, he did sound pretty fired up last night. I'm in this thing for the long haul. Look, today started off to be a pretty rough day for Bernie Sanders. You got Bloomberg getting on board with Biden. Sanders,
full endorsement of Biden.
Full endorsement. Sanders is going to have to show that he has the fire in the belly and the fight to keep his troops motivated, and he's going to have to map out a pathway forward for them. He's going to need Elizabeth Warren to get out. Elizabeth Warren endorsing him would be huge. I don't see that happening. I think she probably does get out.
How does she have any cred on the populist left if she doesn't do that? How does she sit there in neutral? Neutral is basically an endorsement for Biden. How do you structurally do that?
I think her hatred for Bernie Sanders for taking this nomination, or at least the chance to get the nomination away from her, I think probably has her more bitter than anything else. But here's the thing that we got to keep in mind, because look, everyone today is saying, Biden versus Trump, this is what the general election is going to be. To your point about this civil war, this is why the civil war is important for President Trump. Every single word that Joe Biden says from now until he gets the nomination formally at convention, if it takes that long to formally wrap it up, will be used against him in the electoral court of law. Every single thing he says will be shoved back in his face. So as he goes on this primary trail, answering questions, being put on the spot, no safety net. You're now the front runner. You're out there. These are all things. And so when he brought Beto O'Rourke up onto the stage on Monday night and said, Beto O'Rourke is going to be my gun guy, we're going to go and get rid of these guns, Joe Biden, just for all of his so-called general election electability in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin,
all those UAW guys who are NRA members who either voted for Trump or did not vote for Clinton because of the culture issues around guns.
Right. Now they're looking and saying, wait a minute, you're going to go and steal the guns. But this is not going to be your socialist versus capitalist type race on purely ideological lines that people have been talking about.
Raheem, you've been following this. You've particularly been following the movement around him. How much is the movement going to take over and say, hey, we're fighting the man. We're fighting the establishment. Bernie, we love Bernie, but he's not a fighter. We're going to take on. Because remember, the energy in back of Bernie has a lot of it's been AOC. AOC and the squad and that posse, right? And you remember they're the American version of the Corbynistas, right? They're taking on the man, and they want to take the torch to the enemy. The establishment is represented, they think, by Donald. They don't, they see the Wall Street corporatist faction, right? They want to take on Biden, take on the Clintons, take on the entire apparatus, and then turn their fire on Trump. So what do you think?
Well, we were talking about the path in the last segment, and here's the thing, it applies to the left as much as it applies to the right. When we were running UKIP, and we realized that, at some points we were getting outdone and squeezed out in certain races, you've got to take the mentality. You're not getting anything if you lose. Bernie Sanders isn't getting a cabinet position. Bernie Sanders will not get a single one of his policies taken up if Joe Biden is the president. He needs to understand right now this is it's go for broke at this point. But here's the thing, he's not a fighter. So can anyone on his campaign convince him? Dump all the Oppo research, do more digging, do everything you possibly can to high heaven to take AOC, out Joe Biden.
It's AOC and the squad and those people. AOC's the fighter. She's brought the energy. She's going to bring the heat. I 100% agree with Raheem. I don't think people thought about it. There are no goodies for these guys, right? This is a flat-out war. There's no cabinet positions. You're not going to get a couple of judges you want. They're going to say, no, we're going to shut you out and shut you. I mean, look at Begilia, look at Carville. They're sitting there going, my Democratic Party, you're not a member, you got to take. I mean, they wanted him to quit last night. Remember, Carville was sitting there saying, you got to quit. My Democratic Party that we worked for forever, doesn't want you, and you've been shut out.
Bernie is going to have to find some kind of way to capture the Bernie versus crooked dynamic from 2016. He has to somehow take Joe Biden and make him a relic of the past and say, why would we go back to that?
Remember, in 2016, he didn't. With the Clinton cash, we got the 10 million downloads. We did the movie. Bernie's guys, the reason they had so many downloads, so many views, were the Bernie people, not Trump Nation. Trump had already, for years of watching Breitbart and Judicial Watch and Bossy, they knew it all. This came as a big revelation because Bernie wouldn't do it. That's why I said Bernie's was a pillow fight. All the stuff, all the material that we had to go after Clinton, that President Trump was boom, candidate Trump was boom, 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 like a howitzer. That was all there for Bernie. He never touched it. It was all a pillow fight.
And once we start diving into Joe Biden, we start going through his brothers. We start going through Hunter Biden. We start going through the
whole thing on China. His thing right now, he's totally compromised and corrupted by China. You talk about this coronavirus. The coronavirus is going to be a big deal in this campaign. Joe Biden's terrible about that. Joe Biden is been essentially a partner of the Chinese Communist Party. He's going to have to answer all that. Where's Bernie? Why is it War Room 2020 bringing it up? Bernie, where are your guys? You got the Oppo. Time to dump it, right? And time to dump it is now before Michigan, because Michigan is, you don't have to wait to get blown out in Florida where you're going to get blown out. You got another tell of the Democratic Party. Any guy that can't compete and at least tie down President Trump in Florida and make him spend time. They're basically, if it's Bernie, they're giving a plaza. So Bernie's got to represent here. Raheem, what are your thoughts? How people get into the show? We got about 10 seconds.
Hashtag War Room 2020. Got lots of people chiming in. We'll get some of the comments after the break.
Let's do that. Okay, this is episode 21. Glad to be back in the saddle at War Room 2020. Our focus here is to give you the analysis and the insights of the coming campaign. We're going to be back with the squad in a moment.
War Room 2020. Bannon, Miller, Kassan.
Welcome back to episode 21, War Room 2020. Stephen K. Bannon, Raheem Kassan, Jason Miller had to bounce for a very important meeting with everything going on here in Washington in much demand. Raheem, let's get one of the things I love about War Room Pandemic and War Room 2020 is the audience participation. Remember, this is your show. We're building a community. This is all about you, your thoughts, your opinions. We'll provide the news. We'll provide some analytics and analysis, but we want to hear your observations. So, Raheem, rip through some of the best ones we got.
A lot of people asking for Vox Populi to be brought back, Steve.
I got it. We got to do it. By the way, we're going to do it, folks. We've been so jammed on the pandemic and this. We're definitely getting a Vox Populi. I got a bunch of also major announcements on distribution coming up in the days and weeks ahead. So we're getting that all sorted. We're kind of making this up, as you can tell, as we go along. So it's Vox Populi is high on the list.
for the new audience members, Vox Populi is our call-in segment where you get to call into the show and air your grievances yourself. We'll be bringing that back. Questions: what will the DNC do in Milwaukee when Bernie supporters, quote, burn it down? You remember this James O'Keefe sting that he got a bunch of the Bernie supporters, campaign staffers, really senior campaign staffers, saying Milwaukee will burn if Bernie isn't the nominee. Steve, do you think, I mean, are we going to see the National Guard deployed out there in Milwaukee?
I don't know if it'll be Chicago in '68, but I got to tell you, I think the Democratic establishment, and particularly the media that is rubbing their nose in it, is really misplayed this. And it's these Bernie people are very dedicated. They've got, and I think on some levels they've got some real grievances about some things. Look, I'm far from a socialist. I think a lot of the stuff they're asking about is crazy, but they understand kind of what's going on in a lot of respects, and they're angry. And I think the way this is handled, and particularly if they continue to steal this from Bernie, it's going to be, I think Milwaukee is not going to be, guys are not going to be going out to the Brewers game and just having a couple of beers and having a great time. I think it could be very intense in Milwaukee.
The other question coming out is about the Alabama Senate primary. Sessions and Tuberville go into the runoff. Steve, any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, Senator Sessions has been a longtime populist and an agrarian populist down there, one of the key guys that ever endorsed President Trump. They've clearly had a falling out over the handling of this Russia situation. And look, it was a very tight race in there. I actually thought Bradley Byrne actually represented pretty well. He did much better than I thought he was going to do. He's kind of the establishment guy. But the tweet this morning from President Trump, I think, added a whole new dynamic down there. So folks are going to have to see. Sessions got a lot of support down there. But Coach Tuberville, look, great coach at Auburn, clearly has connected with the Christian right down there. So we're going to have to see. We're going to be following that one intensely. It's a very big Senate race, not just about who wins this primary, but who takes on Jones in the fall.
It's rough because, the president being critical of Sessions on Twitter this morning, but also people are pointing out that Tuberville's campaign staff, a lot of them come over from open borders groups and very establishment groups. So it'll be a very interesting race. Of course, another interesting race we saw, Steve, that we've been following closely is the CA50 race. It looks like Darrell Issa prevailed over the more establishment liberal Col DeMaio, who was running in that seat as well. So I think I'm pretty certain that that's good news. It was a pretty fractious campaign down there, and looks like Darrell Issa probably become, with the way the vote is split, will become the congressman for CA50.
Raheem, we got to bounce. We got war and pandemic next. A bunch of guests. Dr. Hatfield's going to be joining us. See you in a few minutes.